Welcome to ESG Decoded, where we unravel the business complexities at the intersection of environmental, social, and governance issues.
I'm Erica Schiller, and I'm joined by my Climeco colleagues, Emma Cox and Anna Stablum.
Get ready to explore the intersection of sustainability, innovation, and ethical leadership, the dynamic forces shaping our global economy.
From climate action to social responsibility, we're here to decode the ESG landscape by interviewing interesting leading figures across the globe that will empower you with actionable insights.
Whether you're a seasoned practitioner or just embarking on your sustainability journey, this podcast is your compass for navigating the future of responsible business practices.
Let's decode ESG together. Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of ESG Decoded. Today I think it will be a really exciting episode as I have two guests that work together in a program called Transform, but their day-to-day work actually looks and feels quite different. So first we have Bintang Ekananda, who's an entrepreneur out of Jakarta, Indonesia, fighting plastic pollution. Welcome to the show, Bintang.
Hi, Anna. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone.
We also have Jessie Coates with us from London. She works as a global director for Ernst & Young. Thank you so much for joining us, Jessie.
Thank you. Lovely to be here, Anna.
So first, we will introduce our amazing guests and hear what is driving them to take action in the area of sustainability. And secondly, I would like to explore a little bit more how large multinational companies can help small startups in areas like Africa or Southeast Asia, and importantly, vice versa, how innovation and entrepreneurship can help large established companies in a win-win situation. So please let's start with you, Bintang. Do you mind giving the listeners a quick introduction and what made you set up your startup company, Alner?
Yeah, thanks, Anna. Hi, my name is Bintang. So I'm based in Jakarta. I'm the founder and CEO of Alner. My background is really an environmental engineer by trade. So I finished my bachelor and master's in environmental engineering. So this is really influencing me on what I want to be in my career, like in the future. I've spent 4 years as a corporate environmental engineer 6 years ago. Before I met a venture studio called NVU. They're based in Rotterdam, but also opening up their office in Indonesia at the time. So I really joined as a founder in residence in this studio. And then we set up this company where it will become Alner later. But the idea is really that we see Indonesia has really big problem in plastic pollution, and most of the solutions just really focusing on recycling downstream. So we want to set up alternative solutions where we really focus on the upstream solutions, which is reuse and refill solutions. So that's really the main driver on why we set up Alner, and I become the entrepreneur until now.
That's brilliant. We've been talking about the plastic pollution on the ESG Decoded podcast, and it is obviously a very big problem, and in some countries bigger than in other countries. And obviously Indonesia is struggling a little bit with their waste management system that we can talk a little bit more about later in the podcast. But over to you, Jessie. Do you mind explaining a little bit about your day-to-day job in London and how you got connected to Alner and about the work that you are doing at Ernst & Young?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Anna. And I've been really looking forward to this conversation today with you and Bintang, because Transform and Alner as an enterprise, they're programs and projects that are really close to my heart. So as a quick introduction, as you shared, my name's Jessie Coates, and I'm based in London in the UK, but my remit is global. I now sit as part of our global corporate responsibility leadership team at EY. And I know that you're both familiar with EY, but maybe for some of your listeners that aren't, we're a truly global professional services firm. We run the full gamut of services from assurance and tax and consulting, as well as strategy and transactions. And we have over 400,000 employees in over 150 countries. And our typical client base is the world's largest governments and multinational corporations. And that's actually the background that I originally came from. I've worked with EY for over 15 years in lots of different roles. I started my career, as many of us do, as an accountant, later as a business consultant serving governments and large multinationals. But I've always had a very strong belief in the power of business to solve society's toughest challenges, and have been lucky enough over the years to kind of move that from being something that I did side of desk on a voluntary role, volunteering and supporting with nonprofits and social enterprises, into something that has now become my job, my full-time day job. And at EY now, as a purpose-led organization, we have our global corporate responsibility program, EY Ripples, which was launched in 2019. And it really seeks to mobilize the skills and expertise of our 400,000 people, who are, of course, incredibly talented accountants and data analysts and business advisors. And we do that on a not-for-profit basis, as well as really looking to collaborate with that ecosystem of public and private sector clients that we have, as well as entrepreneurs like Bintang and nonprofits, to solve some of society's biggest challenges together. And that's now my specific remit, is leading those ecosystem efforts for EY. And in that context, it's been a real privilege for me over the last few years to sit on the management team of Transform, which is this large-scale program that we run jointly with Unilever and the UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, the FCDO, because I think it's one of the best examples of how governments and multinationals and entrepreneurs can join forces for meaningful impact on the ground. Anna, would it help to briefly kind of introduce Transform in terms of what it is and what we do?
I think that could be helpful to the listeners. And then it would be great if we can hear about how Bintang and his company would fit into the setup of Transform. So please, Jessie, go ahead.
Great. Yeah. So to briefly introduce Transform, it's a £90 million public-private partnership, and it takes the form of an impact accelerator, which provides grant funding and business support to visionary impact entrepreneurs like Bintang across Africa and Asia, as you shared, Anna. And we target entrepreneurs that are scaling market-based solutions that are particularly pertinent to the FMCG value chain, so to Unilever's value chain, like those that are tackling plastic waste and improving low-income livelihoods. And the way the program works is that FCDO contributes grant funding through public money. EY contributes pro bono capacity building to the startups in the form of consulting projects, executive coaching, and tailored workshops. And Unilever provides both grant funding as well as the opportunity to pilot projects with Unilever brands or in the Unilever value chain to test and validate their potential to scale. And I would also just say that this conversation is particularly good timing because this year we're celebrating a really significant milestone for Transform. It's our 10-year anniversary. And during that time, we've supported over 140 enterprise projects in 19 different countries, which have gone on to collectively raise more than £50 million worth of follow-on funding and reach over 19 million lives. And I couldn't resist sharing that because we're really proud of those stats.
Yeah, you should be.
Thank you. But maybe also just to highlight the link with Bintang. And I think one thing that we have really actively looked to evolve over the last 10 years since Transform was established is to ensure that it is a truly global and local initiative. And we now have regional committees of EY, Unilever and FCDO counterparts in the 6 key markets where Transform operates, including Indonesia. And their role is to find and fund local entrepreneurs who are innovating locally relevant but globally scalable solutions. And we think that's really important because it's local entrepreneurs like Bintang that really understand the problems facing their communities and their environment on the ground and who already have these solutions to these problems. We just need to help them scale. So maybe that's a good opportunity for Bintang for you to share how you came to be involved in Transform and more about Alner.
Yeah, I, like Jessie mentioned, that essentially as our solution is really to help big brands like Unilever to provide their products in more environmentally friendly packaging, in this case is through returnable and refillable packaging. So before Transform, we have been in contact for a while. So we've been talking with the sustainability team of the Unilever Indonesia team. This is going back in 2023 until this transform opportunity came up. And then we decided to, sort of like to apply this opportunity. And I think there is this precedent that Unilever Indonesia, especially like, really looking for other solutions than recycling to complement its sustainability effort. And in this case, like reuse and refill solutions become a very good fit. So I think that's why we were applying Transform and get selected. And then it's been amazing since then. Like we've been piloting with 3 of Unilever Indonesia brands. We've reached more than 5,000 people through this solution. And then we've even got a follow-on funding from Transform. So it's called a scale funding. So I think there is also brand new funding from Transform. Not sure if Jessie could also add that point, but yeah, we've got that follow-on funding as well. So yeah, hopefully more and more social enterprises, especially from Indonesia, will get benefits from such grants from Transform.
And Bintang, do you mind explaining a little bit what your business is actually doing? You've mentioned a couple of times a refill and reuse system, but maybe first, if you don't mind explaining, what was the problem that you tried to solve, and how did you come up with the idea of solving it in this particular way?
Absolutely. So Alner is essentially like a circular retail platform. So we basically help brands, especially FMCG companies, in this consumer goods product from personal care, home care, and food and beverages, to launch or to redesign their products where predominantly, let's say, sold in single-use packaging. So now they can be sold in returnable and refillable packaging. And we help them to design it, to select the packaging. We also help them to launch these products through our platform. So our platform consists of online channels, like we sell directly to consumers, like the milkman model. But more importantly, we empower local micro entrepreneurs like sari-sari stores or like waste banks communities in Indonesia to be these refill stations. So in the Unilever case, for example, we sell Unilever brands through refill model in these micro entrepreneurs, starting from just 200 in the first years, going to 600 to 700 micro entrepreneurs empowered to be refill stations. So the reason why we do this is because we believe that recycling alone wouldn't solve the problem of this plastic pollution, especially in Indonesia, where we live very close with this problem every day. So we thought at Alner, we need alternative solution, where we can prevent the plastic pollution at the source. And we believe that reuse and refill system could be, one of the solutions to tackle this problem.
That's interesting. And may I just ask you to explain to our listeners that are maybe not that familiar with Indonesia, what's a sari-sari shop?
Yeah, so it's small stores owned by normally a family. It's technically run by 1 or 2 people. So it sells daily essentials from rice, cooking oil, shampoos, body wash. But they're particularly known to sell these products in small packaging called sachets. And it is very, very hard to recycle them, at least from the economics perspective. As an environmental engineer, I still believe that there will be technology to recycle, but it's far more than that. The problem is it's not just like, recycling them, but also collecting them, because they are very small and then they don't have necessarily, economic value. So nobody wants to collect them. The informal sectors like the scavengers, don't want to collect them, because you can imagine just to collect 1 kilograms, you will need thousands of these small sachets, and it will take time. So we do have to think holistically how we can, in phases or like gradually replacing the single-use sachets with other alternative solutions. And what we propose is this, returnable and refillable models to to prevent them at the source.
And could I ask you, because one of the reasons that I've at least understood for buying these small sachets is that it is maybe small families or one or two household members that would buy in small packages and maybe not go to the large supermarket and buy in bulk. How do you make it kind of economic for these smaller households or families that actually can't afford to buy larger? Are your containers small as well, or how do you solve for that when it comes to actually affordability of buying in bigger packages for you as well, I guess, to take these products to the shops and to move them around to individuals? Do you mind explaining a little bit how we can maybe move away from this kind of economy of small sachets and small containers?
So first of all, we have to admit that this is not going to happen overnight. But what we do with these micro entrepreneurs like these sari stores, normally we sit together with them and then explain that for their consumers, normally they will end up paying higher prices per milliliter, normal, like even 10 to 40% for a family. So this is the first information that we normally, discuss with them, so that this could be passed to the consumers. So we doing it like doing this a little bit of education, not like so formal education, but like because the warung or the sari stores consumers are normally know each other because they're neighbor. So these conversations are happening on the ground. So that's the first part that we do in terms of marketing this solution. And then second, because we work directly with these big corporations, big brands like Unilever, we have this privilege to get the products in bulk, let's say in 5-liter jerry cans. And then what we do is that we distribute these products in big vessels to these sari stores. And then the owners will sell these products in smaller units. And then consumers can buy as they need, without having to pay the cost of the packaging, because it's essentially eliminated in the first place. So I think this is how it works economically. And that's very important. We have to work with the product owners. Otherwise, we cannot compete with the sachet themselves. And then maybe later there will be another factor will make this scale up, like the regulation. At the end, we need to limit the production of these small sachets in the future. But we have to do that very carefully because, as you mentioned, many people depend on these products for their life. So there must be a plan, like a very rigorous plan to do that. But we have to do that from now.
Just to chime in, I think one of the things that from a transform perspective, we felt was really important and innovative about Bintang's model is how he's described how he's solving a really clear environmental challenge in terms of plastic pollution in a way that is not just recycling plastic, but removing it entirely from the system, but also doing it in a way that is commercially viable and actually has the potential to improve the livelihoods of shopkeepers, whilst also still enabling consumers to continue to buy their products in a very affordable way without putting any additional cost onto them. And I think kind of it's actually that kind of mix, that blend of solving both environmental and social challenges in one solution and doing it in a market-based, scalable, commercially viable way is kind of exactly the sweet spot that we kind of look for in the solutions and the entrepreneurs that we support through Transform.
I appreciate that, Jessie. I mean, there is obviously a real opportunity here for that mutual kind of value exchange when you have these large corporates. And I would like to ask you, Jessie, in that sense, why would a company like Unilever be involved? And do you think that there would be other companies interested to get involved and helping small entrepreneurs like Bintang? And yeah, what is really in it for them if you compare to their previous business model?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of that win-win for the small businesses, big multinationals like Unilever, like EY, as well as governments, is kind of exactly what Transform seeks to do. Maybe I could just take each of the kind of founding members of Transform and try to kind of articulate the business case for kind of their respective investment and what they get out of it. So for FCDO, the public money that they put in has enabled them to achieve their development outcome goals. So this program is already reaching 19 million low-income lives. And given that actually these grants are catalyzing scalable market-based solutions like Alner, many of those we hope will go on to impact millions more in the coming years. But I think also a very interesting additional benefit of a program like Transform to a development institution like FCDO is that the public money is being de-risked by the private capital in the form of that match-funded contribution from Unilever and EY. So the impact return or the value for money for the taxpayer is actually significantly enhanced. So that's the kind of business case for FCDO. For Unilever, the investment that they put into Transform is enabling them to achieve their business sustainability ambitions. So one of which is to reduce its virgin plastic footprint by 30% by 2026 and by 40% by 2028. And I think that's against a 2019 baseline. And again, a very interesting benefit of a program like Transform is that because their private capital is being de-risked by public money, it's enabling much more patient corporate investment in the kinds of transformative but comparatively early stage innovation projects like the refill reuse model that Alner's pioneering that are really critical in this transition to a waste-free world where plastic isn't just recycled, it's actually removed from the system at source. And maybe just finally for EY, our contribution in the form of pro bono consulting creates business value for us in multiple ways. So for our employees, they consistently tell us that volunteering opportunities that enable them to work with and learn from impact entrepreneurs like Bintang, who are really operating at the cutting edge of social innovation and sustainability, are some of the most formative experiences of their consulting careers. And just to build on that, our data tells us that EY people who volunteer with Transform Enterprises and through our wider EY Ripples program, that they demonstrate higher retention, higher performance, and greater pride in working for EY as a firm. And obviously, as a predominantly people-based business, and we operate in a highly competitive talent market, just looking at those metrics, even just that retention metric alone, it actually translates into a material cost saving for us. Of course, the other real kind of value unlock for us is our client proposition. So as a professional services firm, our clients are looking to us to help them solve their sustainability challenges. And so we need to constantly evolve and build our capability in these kind of business models and innovations. And again, our data tells us that when we show up to our clients in a purpose-led way and that we demonstrate an authentic commitment to achieving shared social impact outcomes and that we are really operating at this kind of cutting edge of sustainability, that our clients are more loyal, they have higher net promoter scores, and it also actually drives improved sales growth. So when you put those different elements of those business cases together, we find that actually investing in strategic social impact and sustainability programs like Transform is actually making a tangible business impact at the top and bottom line, whilst also having these positive social environmental outcomes. So I guess that's kind of the business case for the governments and the multinationals kind of involved in Transform. I don't know, Bintang, if you want to share your perspective on what's in it for you as a small business receiving the support from Transform.
Totally, I can add on that. So first of all, I think one of the most tangible impact that we got is, like I mentioned, working with Unilever directly. And even post-Transform, we still have that partnerships. Like right before this podcast, I was just in a call with the Unilever Indonesia team to do this like monthly call. So I think that's a very real impact that we can be integrated, like Jessie mentioned, in the value chain. So it's not just like add-on projects or like sustainability projects, but how we intentionally put this kind of alternative solutions into the business model of the corporate itself. And then second, of course, the funding. It's very catalytic because most impact-driven companies not be able to continue because they are trapped in this so-called valley of death. I think that's real. When you cannot raise a funding between 100K to 500K because you're not in the Series A, you're not in the very early stage, so you end up not getting money from anybody. So this kind of grants like from Transform is really, really helpful for impact-driven companies because the ticket size is just run. So to bridge from your stage as an early stage company to a Series A company or like even pre-Series A company. So that's exactly what we experience from working with Transform. And lastly, like Jessie mentioned, I work directly with the UI Ripples team, from the UK team, from the Australia team, and they've been very helpful. Like this is my first time to work directly with big consulting company like EY, so it's really helpful to get new perspectives from the consultant team, and they really help us to tailor our business model, our plan ahead, how we can achieve, let's say, revenue growth as well as profitability and as soon as possible. I think that's very important because most impact-driven companies will just think about their impacts, but not really taking care of their fundamentals of business. And having conversations with the EY team, I think it's really eye-opening. So yeah, those are three main impacts that we experience ourselves when working directly with Transform.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear both from E&Y perspective that people actually like to work for companies that are trying to have these programs in place, just from a personal perspective, that is actually giving you a lot of kind of gratitude and happiness at work, that you're part and helping entrepreneurs like Bintang and his friends and other startups around the world to actually make a difference. And at the same time, for Bintang, of course, it's interesting the way that you can get access to, obviously, from what I understand, consultants are not cheap normally. So I'm sure it's great to get these kind of experts at hand to help you in your business and to take those decisions. And I do agree that sometimes the impact and NGO kind of interests are unfortunately not supported enough with kind of a business perspective and thinking about how you can support and set up a sustainable business. But I wanted to hear from you though, Bintang. Obviously, the plastic pollution problem is enormous. And how could we get more Alners out there, and what would we need to grow, maybe even if, outside Jakarta and to more cities in Indonesia? What is the key challenges to scale this type of program in your view, and what would be needed from Transform and the companies are involved there to scale this in order to tackle some of the key problems that you are kind of working with on a day-to-day basis?
I think from my personal view that I've seen more and more similar companies emerging, both in Indonesia as well as in Southeast Asia. So I'm really proud that a lot of reuse or refill companies are actually emerging from Southeast Asia, so not just from Indonesia. For example, we've just established this Asia Reuse Consortium not long ago, so I think we're really having a group together to really showcase that reuse does work. So I think that's the first good thing about reuse, like in Southeast Asia. Second is, I want to emphasize again that to scale up, we really need to partner together, with different stakeholders, especially with these corporates, because we have to see that most of the plastic pollution that currently we have is also from these household products. So that's why to speed up the impact, we need to work together side by side. So how we can, launch their products in, let's say, without plastics. Plus, we still need to take care of the waste that's already generated, like recycling, beach cleanup, or waste to energy, even as long as we fulfill the engineering criteria. So we We still need that. But longer term, we have to think how we can prevent from this problem to reoccur in the future. So that's why we prefer at Alner to work directly with this corporate so that we can speed up the impacts. Third one is, of course, the regulation. Like the reasons why not so many corporations like FMCG companies are doing this, in my opinion, it's because there's no level playing field. There's no push in terms of like the regulation. So that's why the current momentum with the Global Plastic Treaty is very important. Even though the progress, I think it's not a story, but it's a momentum to create a level playing field. So not just Unilever, not just like other big companies that are willing to do this, but also other type of FMCG companies are willing to do this because there's this push in terms of like global regulation, binding global regulation. So that's also important. And then that could be implemented as EPR policy in each country, to provide this stick and carrots, like, if companies are not doing this, then there should be like a law enforcement or like punishment, let's say. Also, it should be clear incentives. Like I always promoted this eco-modulation scheme in EPR. When you put more single-use plastic, you need to pay more. And then when you, reduce them, you use reuse system, refill system, then you pay less. So that's creating this kind of market-based incentives as well. So that's where the innovation will thrive on their own. And then it will scale up naturally, I would say.
And Jessie, maybe you want to add a comment or two on that. EPR is obviously extended producer responsibility. And I do believe, Bintang, that we will see some regulation coming out in Indonesia in 2030. Is that correct, on an EPR scheme?
Yes, we already have the seed regulation of that EPR. We just need to strengthen them with clear incentives and disincentives. Then I'm working close with the government as well on that one. I can share more on that one as well later.
Great. Jessie, do you have anything that where you see big businesses? Could we get more Unilevers involved in these types of programs?
Absolutely. And maybe just to double click for listeners that aren't so familiar with EPR or that extended producer responsibility policy that is increasingly being introduced across multiple jurisdictions, and fantastic to hear that it is being introduced in Indonesia. Those policies, they put the accountability for managing plastic waste onto the producers of plastic, so including FMCG companies like Unilever, as opposed to maybe the historical models where that cost is borne by local governments and taxpayers. But absolutely, I think just kind of building on Bintang's points, I think obviously we need to use all the tools in the sustainability toolbox for these types of major development challenges like plastic waste. But I think, as Bintang alluded to so well, we also need these various different tools and actors to come together and to collaborate more effectively. And I think anyone that's worked in the space of multi-stakeholder collaboration knows how incredibly difficult it is to do that effectively. And I think what we see is that in Transform, we believe we have an example of a proven collaborative impact accelerator model that is working and can be scaled. So as a Transform team, we are actively encouraging public and private sector actors, so including other multinationals like Unilever to get involved, other development agencies, foundations, as well as other entrepreneurs to join us in these efforts, both to scale, obviously, this current focus on plastics, but also recognizing that actually we think this innovative public-private partnership model that de-risks investment on all sides and represents that kind of win-win could certainly be applied to other industries and other geographies and other development challenges. So just to encourage listeners that if you're thinking about it, if you're interested to get involved, we'd love to get in touch and share more about the program and opportunities to either replicate or to get involved in the current Transform model.
Great. On that note, though, Jessie, if we look around at this point of time, there's a lot of green hushing going on with companies scared of kind of sticking out their neck and getting involved in sustainability initiatives. It's quite a tricky geopolitical landscape out there. Are you seeing more or less interest for your initiative at this current time? And what do you think is necessary to kind of really push companies to come forward and help out or take responsibility and even benefit, as we heard about the retention rates at Ernst & Young being higher because of this program, etc. There's obviously a lot of benefits for large corporations. But how do you see this working now in this current climate?
Yeah, I think it's a tricky time, right? And the reality is, I think the geopolitical headwinds are certainly driving, as you said, Anna, an era of green hushing. But we are still seeing corporates, I would say particularly those across Europe and across Asia, continuing to prioritize sustainability, whether that's due to ever-rising pressure from regulators and policy, like the EPR policies that we shared, whether that's from investors, but also from consumers and employees. And maybe just to share one comforting stat that I read. So a recent EY study identified that 91% of the European companies surveyed are still experiencing pressure from investors to accelerate their sustainable business practices. So I do think there is still a very real need for the private sector to address social impact and sustainability challenges. But equally, obviously, there are budget pressures. And there is also a very clear need to identify, I think, more efficient, more strategic and innovative ways of delivering against those efforts. And I think in that context, at the global level, we are seeing actually a growing interest in these types of public-private partnership models like Transform, which blend and match public and private sector capital because of that de-risking opportunity on both sides to drive more efficient business and development outcomes. So I think yes and no, we're seeing a more and less, but I think the key opportunity for corporates is to think more strategically and to collaborate. And I think kind of that's where we see this kind of model of Transform, where it is delivering real business benefits in addition to the social and environmental outcomes. And it is joining forces with others who are able to de-risk corporate investment to essentially kind of create a much stronger business case for sustainability investment, which continues to be a priority despite the kind of current climate. So yeah, I wonder, Bintang, be interested to know if you're seeing governments or businesses in Indonesia kind of pull back on sustainability initiatives or not.
Yeah, in Indonesia especially, what I've seen is that there are still a lot of sustainability initiatives are going on, even in the past 2 years. But in my note that I think we do need to level up the solutions that we do, like we provide to our consumers, because we cannot just doing, let's say, solutions to plastic waste, just addressing the symptoms, like I mentioned, because we believe that we cannot just do this, solving the plastic waste problem just in the downstream, but we really need to go higher in the waste management hierarchy, which is the reuse and refill. So that's why I really encourage like corporates in Indonesia especially to try like other solutions, because this is really also related to this green hushing phenomenon. Because if you really come back to what your consumers needs or what the market needs or the science even, you will do something more than what we've already done so far. I can just mention like most of the solutions now, it's just like upcycling and recycling, which is good. Don't get me wrong. Like it's good for awareness. We do need to address the root cause of the problem. If we are able to do this, side by side across stakeholders and supported by the government, I think green hushing should be not relevant anymore, but it will inspire the market and other players to do the same as well. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Thanks, Bintang. Yeah, I think it is interesting to, of course, see as well that there are a lot of companies moving ahead, and exactly what Jessie says, it's easier to move if you actually have a business case behind you, and that's obviously what we've been talking about today on the podcast, that sustainability makes sense for business, not just to be a good corporate citizens, but actually even on the balance sheet. So there are opportunities to both make money and be moving society and planet forward in a green way. But I wanted to hear, Bintang, maybe to wrap up the podcast for today, what do you now expect for Alner, and what's kind of your plans for the near future? How are you planning to grow? How does the journey to scale look like at this point of time for you and your colleagues?
Absolutely. So we now are really focusing to replicate our model outside Jakarta. So because before we've just practically operated in Greater Jakarta, and post-transform, we are able to increase our gross profit margin by 20 points. So I think this is the right time for us to replicate the model. One of the approaches that we do is through franchise model, actually. So we are working with local entrepreneurs, let's say in Bali, in Bandung. We've just launched the first store in Bali today. So I think that is very encouraging. So now we have local entrepreneur will operate the Alner model, delivering products in refill and reuse model. So we really want to replicate this across Indonesia. And then hopefully, in the next 12 months, there will be new brands, let's say in Southeast Asia countries. So it's really about like replicating and then speed up the adoption of this model towards more brands, more consumers, so that we can accelerate the impact as well.
Amazing. And Jessie, are you guys ready to stand behind Bintang in these plans and support where you can?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Bintang alluded to it previously. I think one of the things that we look to do through Transform is to seed and kind of grant fund and support a wide range of different enterprises, but also where we see that opportunity to kind of continue to catalyze them on that journey to provide that kind of scale follow-on funding. And I think we see Alner as one of the innovations and the solutions that really has that kind of potential to scale. So excited at what has already been achieved, and also excited for the future to play that role in hopefully ending plastic waste through at least part of the solution being Alner's refill reuse model.
Yeah, amazing. No, and thanks and congratulations, of course, Bintang as well, on opening your first shop in Bali. That's exciting. There's obviously a lot to be done in Bali, and hopefully that will be the kind of the first shop, and that we will see a lot more basically opening up and having that kind of impact in more islands around Indonesia. With that, I think we will wrap up, and I thank you so much, both of you, Bintang and Jessie, for joining ESG Decoded podcast today and to talk about the way that you are making impact both in your daily lives and with this Transform collaboration that you have come up with. And thanks, of course, to Ernst & Young, Unilever, and to Alner and your colleagues for working so hard to scale and to help in the fight of plastic pollution. So with that, I thank you both for joining, and we hope that you will tune in next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please note, the views of third parties set out in this podcast are not necessarily the views of the global EY organization or its member firms. Moreover, they should be seen in the context of the time they were made.
Thanks for tuning in to ESG Decoded. We hope this episode has inspired you to take action in your own ESG journey, stimulating ideas for partnership and innovation.
New episodes drop bi-weekly on Tuesday morning. Subscribe now on your favorite streaming platform to stay in the loop.
Join the conversation on social media using @ESG Decoded or visit climbco.com for more resources.
Until next time, keep decoding, keep innovating, and keep making a positive impact.